Welcome back to Beyond the Darkness. Tonight, we're diving into the heart of Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains, where the fog rolls in heavy and the woods hide things that should never be seen. Get ready for 4 true creepy encounters from Kentucky, stories that will leave you questioning what lurks in the shadows. So, let's get started. There are places where the earth seems to pulse with an energy that isn't quite right. Places where the very ground beneath your feet feels like it's hiding secrets too dark to understand. Hollow Creek was one such place, located deep in the Appalachian foothills. Hollow Creek wasn't much more than a name on an old map, a forgotten stretch of land, abandoned by time and the world. I'd always heard stories about it, whispers from the older generations, spoken in hushed tones. They said it was cursed, that the land had once belonged to a family whose tragic end had left a mark on the place, a scar that could never be erased. I was never one for superstition, but when I found myself passing through the area late one evening, I couldn't resist the pull to explore. It had been a long day of hiking through the mountains, and I figured a quick stop at Hollow Creek couldn't hurt. It was late, the sky nearly dark, but the moon hung low, casting a cold silver light over the land. I parked my truck by the creek, just where the old trailhead used to be. It was quiet, too quiet, and I felt the odd sensation that something was watching me. I shook it off. After all, this was the kind of place that people just didn't visit anymore, which was probably why it was so unnervingly still. I grabbed my flashlight from the truck and started down the overgrown path that led to the creek. The air was thick with moisture, and the trees seemed to crowd in on me, their branches twisted and reaching toward the ground. I could hear the water of the creek gurgling in the distance, but the closer I got, the stranger the sounds became. It wasn't just water moving. There were whispers, soft, like a breeze carrying voices that weren't my own. My breath quickened, and I stopped, turning my head to the left and then to the right. Nothing. Just the woods. Just the dark. I tried to ignore the feeling creeping up my spine, the sensation that something was wrong. As I continued down the trail, I saw it, the abandoned cabin. It stood at the edge of the creek, barely recognizable under layers of moss and rot. The roof had caved in on one side, and the walls were crumbling, but it was unmistakably a cabin, one that hadn't been touched in decades. The very air around it felt thick, almost like it was heavier than the rest of the forest. The silence was suffocating. I stood there for a moment, hesitating, my eyes locked on the cabin. There was something about it that didn't sit right. It wasn't just the dilapidated state of the structure. It was the way it seemed to wait. It was as if the cabin had been expecting me. Shaking my head, I told myself it was just an old house, nothing more. But deep down, I knew I had to see it up close. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something darker that had drawn me in. I stepped forward, my feet crunching on the dry leaves that littered the ground, and pushed the creaking door open. The smell hit me immediately, a mixture of mildew, rotting wood, and something else. Something metallic. The beam from my flashlight flickered as I swept it around the room. Dust filled the air, but there was more than just dust. The walls were covered with strange symbols, carved into the wood as if someone had been marking their territory, or their doom. I took another step inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. There was a table in the center of the room, and as I moved closer, I saw something that stopped my heart. A journal. Old, worn, and cracked open in the middle, as if it had been waiting for someone to read its pages. I reached out and picked it up, my fingers trembling as I opened it. The handwriting was scrawled in uneven lines, as if the person had been in a hurry, desperate. But it was the words that caught my attention, words that sent a chill straight to my bones. The creek calls to those who listen. The waters carry the voices of the lost, the ones who wandered too far into the dark. They will never leave, not until they find someone to join them. My breath caught in my throat. The air around me seemed to thicken, the whispers growing louder, more distinct. The pages turned themselves as though a breeze was carrying them. The last entry stopped me cold. I hear them now. They call my name from the creek. They won't let me leave. I've become one of them. Before I could even process what I was reading, a sudden, sharp noise filled the room, like something scratching at the walls. I turned quickly, my flashlight darting around the cabin, but nothing was there. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel my skin crawl as the temperature in the room dropped. I dropped the journal, my mind racing. This isn't right. I thought I had come here to explore a forgotten place, but what I was feeling was something far darker. The whispers had stopped, but I could still hear them faintly in the back of my mind. They weren't voices in the wind. They were calls from the creek. They were waiting for me. I backed toward the door, my breath shallow, my eyes darting around the cabin. But as I stepped outside, something stopped me. The moon had risen higher, casting an eerie glow across the creek. But the water wasn't still. It was moving, swirling, as if it had a life of its own. And in the middle of the creek, I saw something. Someone. A figure standing in the water, their back to me. My heart raced, my body frozen in place. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that was pale, featureless, and empty. It was like staring into a void. The whispers returned, louder now, more urgent, as if the creek had seen me, called me. My legs refused to move. The figure reached toward me, its hands stretching unnaturally long, beckoning me forward. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the earth, the sound of the whispers and the rushing water filling my ears. The figure didn't follow, but I could still hear its voice calling to me, drawing me back to the creek. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, slamming the door behind me. The silence in the woods was deafening now, but the whispers still echoed in my mind, louder than ever. I drove away from Hollow Creek, but even as the miles stretched between me and that place, I knew one thing with certainty: the creek never stops calling. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I drove away from the creek. Every glance in the rearview mirror made my skin crawl. The thought of that figure in the water, the pale, empty face, hung in my mind like a ghost. It wasn't just the sight of it that disturbed me. It was the way it had stared at me, unblinking, empty, like it had been waiting for me, like I was meant to see it. The house was quiet when I got back, the stillness of the night wrapping itself around the cabin like a shroud. I had left the door unlocked in my rush to get away, but when I walked inside, something didn't feel right. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold draft swept through the house despite the windows being closed. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and moved through the house, my footsteps muffled on the wooden floor. As I passed the front door, I saw it. Something scrawled on the wall just inside the entrance. At first, I thought it was just dirt or grime, but as I moved closer, I saw that it was too neat, too deliberate. Someone, something, had written on the wall with something dark and thick. The marks were jagged, but they formed letters, words. Leave before it's too late. I froze. My mind raced. There was no way this was a prank. I hadn't told anyone about the strange experience at the creek and no one knew where I was staying. This was something else, something worse. I didn't want to stay. I didn't want to even be in the house anymore, but I couldn't leave. Something was pulling me in, keeping me rooted to the spot, even as my instincts screamed at me to get out. I backed away from the wall, my pulse quickening. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and I could feel my breath becoming visible, like the air itself had turned to ice. The whispers I'd heard at the creek, the faint calls, began to echo in my mind again, louder this time, clearer. They weren't just sounds anymore. They were words, urgent and desperate. Come back to the water. I felt a shiver run through me as I looked around the room, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The walls felt like they were closing in, the house constricting around me. I reached for the door, but before I could touch the handle, the whispers stopped. Everything went silent, and then I heard it. The softest of footsteps, like someone or something was walking outside. I turned, my heart pounding in my chest, and through the window, I saw a shadow, moving along the edge of the trees just beyond the yard. My breath caught in my throat. There was someone out there. But when I looked again, the shadow was gone. I rushed to the door and peered outside, but all I saw were the trees, the endless stretch of the forest that seemed to stretch on forever. I stepped back inside, my hands trembling. The air around me was suffocating, and I could feel my thoughts slipping away, the edges of my vision blurring as though I was slipping into a trance. I didn't know what was happening anymore, but I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. The phone. I needed to call for help. I grabbed my phone off the counter, but the screen was cracked, dead, and unresponsive. I tried again, tapping the screen, but the phone wouldn't turn on. In that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I had no service here. The isolation of the cabin seemed to stretching out beyond the walls, beyond the trees, into the dark expanse of the forest. I felt small, insignificant, like a single thread in a web of something ancient and malignant. I heard the footsteps again. Closer now, slower. But this time, they were coming from inside the house. They echoed in the hall, faint at first, then louder with each passing second. I froze in place, not daring to move. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. My breath caught in my throat. And then, there was a soft knock. One single knock. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The door stood there, silent, the handle untouched, but I could feel its presence. Something was outside, waiting. "Who's there?" I finally managed to croak, my voice shaky and weak. The knock came again, but this time it was harder, louder, as if someone or something was demanding entrance. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The pressure in the room grew unbearable, the air growing thick as if it was pressing down on me. And then it spoke, a voice, low, deep, and distant, but it was unmistakable. "Come back. Come to the water." The voice seemed to come from everywhere. It wasn't coming from the door anymore, or from anywhere specific. It was in my mind, swirling around me, filling my thoughts. The whispers turned into a chant, the same words repeating over and over, a hypnotic call. "Come back to the water. Come back to the water." I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the door handle, but the moment I touched it, I felt a cold, clammy hand close around mine. I gasped and tried to pull away, but the grip was unyielding. It didn't feel like skin. It felt like something else. Something cold, like dead, wet leaves. I screamed, but the sound didn't escape my throat. My body was frozen, and I couldn't move. The grip tightened. My heart raced. And then I heard it, the sound of water rushing, louder than before. It came from outside the door, and as I forced myself to turn the handle, the door opened with a groan. In front of me stood the creek, no longer distant, but right outside the cabin. The waters now high and dark, swirling in the night. And standing in the water was the figure. Its pale face staring at me, its eyes empty. Just like the ones I had seen in the creek, it was waiting for me. The figure in the water did not move, but its presence seemed to fill the entire space around me, pressing in on me like an unseen force. My body was rigid, frozen in place. The cold hand still gripped mine, pulling me toward the door, toward the creek. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. My lungs burned, but the air around me seemed to become thicker, suffocating. I tried to tear myself away, but the figure's grip tightened, and the whispering voices filled my mind. It was the same chant, the same words repeated over and over. Come back to the water. Come back to the water. I glanced around the room, looking for any way to escape, but there was nothing. The door, the windows, they were all just empty portals to the same endless darkness. The whispering grew louder, more desperate. I could feel it vibrating through my skull, burrowing into my brain. With a surge of terror, I pulled my arm free from the figure's grip, stumbling backward. My heart raced as I collapsed against the wall, my mind spinning. The figure in the creek, the whispering voices, the cold hand, they were all connected. Everything was connected, pulling me toward the water, toward the curse that lingered over Hollow Creek. I turned to run, but the floor beneath me seemed to twist and shift, as if the very house was alive, shifting to trap me. The walls groaned, the shadows in the corners of the room stretched toward me like tendrils, and the whispers became a deafening cacophony. Come back, come to us, come to the water. I staggered to the window, my breath shallow, my hands shaking as I gripped the frame. I forced it open, the air outside bitterly cold, and peered into the dark night. The creek, no longer distant, but now right at the edge of the cabin, roiled and churned as if alive, its waters swirling with something ancient and hungry. And standing there, waiting in the moonlight, was the figure. It was closer now, standing just at the edge of the creek, its head slightly tilted as it stared at me. Its face was no longer hidden beneath a hat. Instead, it was a hollow void, empty and featureless, just like the faces I had seen in the windows of the train, just like the ones I had seen in the trees. I felt something inside me snap. My legs moved before I could think, and I ran toward the back door. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care anymore. I just needed to get away, to escape whatever dark force had taken hold of this place. I reached the door, yanking it open with all the strength I had left. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, and I stumbled out onto the porch, gasping for breath. The sounds of the forest, the whispers, the water. It was all around me now, louder than ever, like a living entity reaching for me. I felt it. I could feel the water's call, the way it tugged at me, pulling me toward it. I ran, stumbling through the trees, not sure where I was going, only knowing that I couldn't look back. The whispering was louder now, the voices all around me, their chants growing more frantic. Come back. Come to us. The darkness of the woods surrounded me, but I kept running, my heart pounding in my chest. The ground was uneven, and I nearly tripped several times, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. If I did, the water would take me. I knew it. I could feel it. Just when I thought I might collapse, I saw it. The road. The faint glimmer of headlights in the distance. A car was coming. I stumbled forward, my legs burning with exhaustion, my body on the verge of giving out. I needed help. I needed someone to save me. But as I reached the edge of the road, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was there, standing in the middle of the road, blocking my path. Its empty face stared at me, its body unnaturally still. Behind it, the creek was visible, too visible, the water shimmering, impossibly close. It was as if the forest itself was collapsing around me, pulling me back to where it all began. I stopped in my tracks, unable to move. The whispers were deafening now, and I could feel the weight of them pressing in on me. The figure took a slow step forward, and I knew in that moment that I had no choice. There was no escape. The forest had already claimed me, just as it had claimed the others before me. I turned to run, but it was too late. The shadows of the trees stretched out and wrapped around me, pulling me back toward the water. The ground beneath my feet gave way, and I fell, tumbling toward the dark, swirling creek. The figure moved toward me, its presence suffocating, its hollow eyes locked on mine. And then, just as my hands touched the water, I heard it one last time. The whispering. I stood frozen in the clearing, staring at the figure with the hollow, empty face. The air around me felt thick, as if the very forest had taken on a life of its own, pressing in on me from all sides. I could feel my pulse in my throat, the whispers in my mind growing louder, as if the woods themselves were calling me closer. "Join us." The voice echoed in my head, but it was no longer the soothing whisper from before. Now it was an urgent command, demanding my obedience. I wanted to run. I should have run, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the earth had wrapped its roots around my legs, holding me in place. The figure in front of me didn't move, but its presence was overwhelming, like an invisible force closing in on me. I could feel its gaze, empty and cold, locked on me, even though there were no eyes, no features to read. The wind picked up, swirling around the clearing, and I finally managed to tear my eyes away from the figure. The trees around me were alive, their branches twisting, reaching out as if they too were trying to pull me in. My breath quickened, and my head swam with confusion and fear. What was happening? How had I gotten so far into the woods? Why was I here? The voice called again, louder this time. "Come closer." I stumbled back, my legs finally obeying me, but it was too late. The air seemed to thicken, the shadows pressing in on me, blocking the path I had come from. The figure remained still, its hollow face now facing me fully. The darkness around it seemed to bleed into the woods, pooling around its feet, as if the forest itself were drawing power from this thing. The whispers came again, swirling around me like a storm. "Join us, or be left behind." I couldn't breathe. The figure was right there, and I could feel the forest closing in around me. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift, like I was standing on something soft, something that was giving way. My hands trembled as I reached out to steady myself against a tree. But when I touched it, the bark felt wrong, slick and cold, like metal instead of wood. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I finally forced my legs to move, pushing myself to take a few steps back. But as I did, the shadows stretched forward, the trees seeming to shift with a mind of their own, blocking every exit. There was no way out. The woods were alive, and they were keeping me here. The figure took a step forward, its feet silent against the ground. And in the silence that followed, I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, my heart leaping into my throat, but there was nothing. Just the oppressive silence of the woods. Then I heard something else, a faint whisper just on the edge of my hearing. It sounded like a voice, but it wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking to someone else. The words were indistinct, but the tone was unmistakable. It was pleading, urgent, desperate. I glanced around again, but the darkness pressed in tighter, and I could feel the eyes of the trees, the eyes of the forest, all trained on me. And then, from the shadows, something moved. It was another figure, stepping out from between the trees. It was tall, just like the first one. But this one had no shape at all. It was just a mass of shifting shadows, flickering in the moonlight like smoke. It didn't have a face, but I could feel its gaze, cold and hungry, pressing against me. I turned to run, panic overtaking my body, but I was surrounded. The trees were blocking my path in all directions. There was no way out. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the forest. I could feel my legs giving out beneath me, my breath ragged in my chest. Suddenly, a figure stepped in front of me. It was the first one again, the one with the hollow face, and it reached out with long, skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and I could feel the presence of the forest intensify, pulling me toward it. My vision blurred, my mind spinning as I tried to break free from the force that held me. And then it spoke again. But this time, the voice wasn't just in my head. It came from the figure, low and deep, vibrating through my chest. "You've heard the call. You've come too far. Now you must stay. Join us." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The figure's hand was inches from my face, and I felt the cold emanating from it, as if it were made of ice. The forest around me seemed to press in, the trees now forming a tight circle, trapping me in the clearing. In a panic, I closed my eyes, not wanting to look at it anymore, not wanting to feel its cold fingers brush against my skin. But when I opened them again, everything had changed. The forest had transformed. The trees were no longer just trees. They were twisted, their trunks gnarled and warped, as if they were alive, as if they were part of the figure itself. The ground beneath me felt soft, like I was standing on moss, but it was colder, wet, and shifting. The voices had stopped, and the forest was silent now. But the stillness was worse than the whispers. The air was thick with something dark, something ancient. I could feel the weight of the presence surrounding me, watching me, waiting for me. And then I heard it again, the whisper, but this time, it wasn't a voice in my mind. It was a sound, a word, spoken by someone, something, just behind me. "Run!" I didn't hesitate. I spun around, my feet moving faster than my mind could keep up. I had to get out. The voice, the figure, the darkness, it was all closing in on me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My feet pounded against the earth as I ran, faster and faster, the path ahead growing more twisted, more unnatural. The whispering started again, growing louder, swirling around me. I could feel the presence of the lost ones at my back, their cold eyes burning into my spine. But just as I thought I might collapse, I broke through the trees. The moonlight hit me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could see the open sky, the road, the town in the distance. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running. The world blurred around me as I sprinted, my legs burning, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The moonlight, once a reassuring guide, now felt like a mocking light, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist around me. The whispers were louder now, filling my ears, filling my mind, pulling me back toward the woods. I could feel their presence behind me, the lost ones, their cold gaze burning into my back. But I ran. I had to get away. The trees seemed to move around me, shifting and closing in as if they were alive, trying to block my path. Each step I took felt like a struggle, as if the earth itself was trying to hold me in place. I stumbled, tripping over roots, but I pushed forward, my vision blurry with fear and exhaustion. And then, in the distance, I saw it. The road. The narrow dirt path that led to the town. It was only a few hundred yards away, but it felt like miles. My heart pounded in my chest as I forced my legs to carry me faster. I could hear the trees creaking behind me, the whispers growing louder and louder until it felt like they were inside my head, demanding that I turn around, begging me to return to the woods. I reached the road and collapsed onto the dirt, gasping for air, my body trembling with adrenaline. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but my throat was dry, my voice lost in the night. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, trying to steady my breathing, but the fear didn't leave me. It clung to my skin like a thick fog, suffocating, pressing against my chest. The whispers died down, but they were still there, lingering just beneath the surface. And then I heard it. A sound I hadn't expected, a voice that cut through the silence like a knife. "You're not safe." I jerked my head up, my heart skipping a beat. The voice wasn't in my head anymore. It was real, and it was coming from the darkness just beyond the tree line. I scrambled to my feet, backing away from the edge of the woods. The road behind me was empty. The town was still miles away, and the forest stretched out like an endless maze in front of me. I was trapped again, caught between the woods and the darkness that had followed me from the heart of Cross Hollow. The voice spoke again, closer this time, but I couldn't see anyone. I could only hear the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching softly against the ground. And then I saw it. A figure, standing just at the edge of the trees, tall, thin, its face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The same figure I had seen before, the one that had haunted me in the forest, the one whose hollow eyes had followed me through the darkness. The hollow man. I froze, my blood running cold. The figure stepped forward, its shadow stretching out like a dark stain across the road. I wanted to run, to turn and escape, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was trapped, caught in the gaze of the lost ones. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, staring at me with that empty, hollow gaze. The whispers filled the air once more, swirling around me, growing louder, urgent, desperate. "Come back to the water." The voice in my head, the voice of the figure, the voice of the forest. It was all the same. I couldn't look away. The figure was too close now, its presence too overpowering. I could feel the weight of it, the pull of the forest, the lure of the lost ones. They wanted me. They wanted me to join them, to disappear into the woods, to become just another shadow, another face in the darkness. "Join us." The whispers filled me, surrounded me, drowning out my thoughts. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. I could feel the cold, the weight of it pressing down on me. The figure stepped closer, its long, skeletal hand reaching out. The shadows crawling toward me like tendrils, wrapping around my body. And then suddenly the figure stopped. I felt a shift in the air, a change. The shadows retreated, the whispers faded, and I could feel my breath again, my heart still racing, but the weight lifting from my chest. The figure was gone, The voice was gone. I stood there, trembling, looking around, but the road was empty again. The woods were silent, the moon shining coldly over the trees. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know if it had been real or if I had imagined it. But one thing was clear: the lost ones were real. They were out there in the woods, and they had been waiting for me. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in fear, but when I finally gathered enough strength to move, I turned and ran. I ran, not stopping until I reached the town. The lights of Cross Hollow glowed in the distance, a small comfort in the vast, oppressive darkness. The woods were behind me, but I could still feel them watching, waiting, like the shadows of the trees were reaching out for me. As I reached the town, I passed the old diner. The lights were still on, and through the window, I saw Will, the old man I had spoken to before. He was sitting alone at the counter, staring at something in front of him. When he saw me, he stood up, his eyes wide with recognition. He didn't say a word, but I could see the fear in his face. The fear of someone who knew the truth. The truth that I was now a part of the lost ones, whether I liked it or not. I didn't stop. I kept running, but the voices followed me, their whispers trailing in my mind, louder than ever. They weren't just in the woods anymore. They were in me, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that I would never be free of them. The town of Black Hollow was no stranger to the unusual. Nestled deep in the mountains, it was a place forgotten by time, where the fog rolled in heavy and thick, and the sun barely pierced the canopy of twisted trees that surrounded it. The people of Black Hollow were tough, used to the eerie atmosphere that lingered like a second skin over the town. But even they couldn't explain the disappearances. The disappearances of those who went into the woods, never to return. I wasn't from Black Hollow. I had heard the stories, of course. Everyone who lived in the valley knew of the dark woods, of the whispers that drifted through the trees at night, of the old legends that kept the townsfolk from venturing too far into the forest. It was all just folklore, I thought, the kind of thing to tell to scare children or to pass the time on a dark evening. But when I took the job as a park ranger at the nearby national forest, I learned that the stories had a disturbing truth behind them. At first, everything seemed normal. The forest was dense and dark, but the air was clean, and the sounds of birds and small animals filled the space. But as time went on, I began to hear strange things, soft whispers carried by the wind, faint voices in the distance when there was no one around. The feeling of being watched, always lurking in the back of my mind, became harder to ignore. The first disappearance that rattled me was that of Karen Mitchell, a local teacher who went for a hike on a trail near Black Hollow. She had done it countless times before, but this time she didn't come back. Her friends and family launched a search, but after several days, they found nothing. No sign of struggle, no trail left behind. Just an empty path and silence that hung over the woods like a blanket. I remember the looks on the faces of the townspeople. It was as though they had expected it. No one seemed truly shocked, not the way I was. The people of Black Hollow were used to loss. They had lived in the shadow of the forest for so long. They had come to accept its dark pull. The disappearance of Karen was just another tragedy added to the long list of the forest's hungry history. I couldn't let it go. I kept returning to the spot where Karen had last been seen, walking the trail by myself, hoping for answers, hoping to find something that would explain what had happened to her. But the deeper I ventured into the woods, the more I felt that sense of unease, of being followed, of the trees watching me. One evening, when the fog had settled thick in the valley and the air was damp with moisture, I found something. It was small, almost insignificant at first. A scrap of fabric caught on a branch, torn and weathered, but it was enough. I followed the small trail of remnants deeper into the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees grew thicker, their trunks twisted and gnarled, blocking out the light. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. And then I heard it, a whisper. Soft at first, like a breath on the wind. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the trees. It was a voice. A low murmur that seemed to echo around me. But I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Come closer. I froze. My pulse quickened, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned around, my flashlight cutting through the thick fog. The path behind me was empty. No one was there. But I could feel it now, the presence. It was all around me, pressing in from all sides. The whispers grew louder. Come closer. We're waiting for you. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, my breath shallow. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew it wasn't right. I knew I needed to get out of there. The whispers, now more distinct, filled the air. Their words clear as they swirled around me. Come to us. Join us. And then I saw it. A figure just beyond the trees, standing still in the fog. At first I thought it was a person, someone who had gotten lost, but as I focused on it, I realized that it wasn't human. It was too tall, too thin, and its form seemed to blend into the shadows of the woods. The figure was motionless, its head tilted slightly, as though it were studying me, waiting for me to move closer. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, locked in place, my eyes glued to the figure. And then it spoke, its voice low, barely a whisper, but I could feel it in my bones. Come closer, Ranger. The lost ones are waiting. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure in the fog. It stood just beyond the trees, tall and impossibly thin, its shape barely visible through the mist. The whispers in the air were like a soft hum in my ears, and for a moment, I thought I might be losing my mind. This couldn't be real. I had to be imagining things. But I had heard the whispers, felt their presence, and now I was seeing something that defied every logical explanation I had. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. It was as if it was waiting for me to approach, to step into its world. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming in front of me, but I couldn't make myself leave. The forest around me was silent, the usual rustling of animals gone, replaced by a heavy, oppressive stillness. My heart pounded in my chest. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling around me like a storm. Come closer. Join us. The voice felt like it was inside my mind, as though it was coming from every direction at once. I took a step forward, my legs moving against my will. The voice wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a pull, a magnetic force that tugged at the very core of me, urging me toward the figure. But just as my foot touched the soft earth of the forest floor, the figure's form seemed to shimmer, flickering like a shadow before it vanished entirely into the fog. I stopped, my heart racing, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. My breath caught in my throat as I stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The forest around me was still, too still. The absence of sound felt suffocating, and the weight of the silence pressed against my chest. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I had heard the voice. I had seen the figure, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was calling me, drawing me into the woods, deeper and deeper. I tried to take a step back, but the ground beneath me seemed to shift, as if the forest itself was shifting, closing in around me. The trees were taller now, their trunks more twisted, their branches stretching outward like skeletal fingers, blocking my way. The whispers started again, louder this time, and I could feel them pressing against my skull, a cacophony of voices that echoed in my mind. Come closer. The voice was clearer now, more distinct. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many, all layered together, whispering the same words. Join us. You will find peace with us. I staggered backward, my breath coming faster, the fear bubbling up in my chest. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't. But when I turned around to leave, I found the path was gone. The trees had moved, closing off any exit. The forest had swallowed the trail, and I was trapped. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. The trees seemed to be closing in, their branches bending low as if to cradle me, to trap me in their embrace. I turned again, desperately searching for a way out, but the shadows were everywhere, pressing in from all sides. Then I heard something else. Footsteps, soft and measured, coming from behind me. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. But when I looked, there was no one there. The air grew thicker, colder, and I could feel the weight of something ancient in the trees. It was as if the forest itself had become alive, its breath pulling at me, drawing me deeper into its grasp. The whispers didn't stop. They were everywhere now, inside my mind, in the very air I breathed. We are the lost ones. The voice was clear now, its words solid, as though the forest itself was speaking through the shadows. I looked around, desperate for some sign of escape, but the world seemed to be dissolving around me, the trees bending in unnatural ways, their limbs reaching for me. I had to get out. But before I could move, I heard a voice, clear, sharp, and familiar. You've come too far. You should have stayed away. The voice was Will's. I spun around, but there was nothing behind me, nothing but the fog and the shadows. But his words echoed in my mind, their weight pressing on me. I didn't understand. How could Will know? How could he have been part of this? The whispers came again, but this time, they were more frantic. Come to us. I stepped forward, my feet moving against my will. The shadows seemed to stretch out, pulling me toward the heart of the forest. The closer I got, the more the trees seemed to sway, their branches brushing against me like skeletal fingers. I felt them all around me, closing in, wrapping their cold, gnarled limbs around me, trapping me in the heart of the woods. And then, in the distance, I saw it. A clearing, bathed in a faint, otherworldly glow. It was as if the forest had opened a door, and the light from within beckoned me forward. I knew I had to go, that I had no choice, and yet my body screamed for me to turn around, to run away from the pull of the woods, from the lost ones. I forced myself to keep walking. The clearing was ahead, just a few more steps, and I would be free. I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but I knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. The woods had claimed me, and the whispers would never stop. As I entered the clearing, the light grew brighter, blinding, and I heard it again. The voice, no longer a whisper but a roar, filling my mind. Welcome to the lost ones. The clearing was unlike anything I had ever seen. The light that bathed it was strange, unnatural, as if it came from nowhere, a glow that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The trees around the clearing were bent and twisted, their trunks like old bones, contorted in impossible shapes. The air was thick with a sense of wrongness, and yet there was an undeniable pull to the center. I took a step into the clearing, and immediately I felt it. The whispers, now no longer soft or distant, filled the air around me. They were everywhere, in my head, in my ears, swirling like an endless storm. Join us. Come closer. Be one of us. They grew louder with each step, but there was no turning back now. The clearing beckoned me forward, and I couldn't resist. As I reached the center, I saw something that made my stomach turn. A circle of figures standing perfectly still in the center of the glow. They were like shadows made of smoke, their forms indistinct, like a ripple in the air itself. At first, I thought they were just illusions, mere tricks of the light. But as I stepped closer, they became clearer, their shapes more defined. Tall, thin, and standing in perfect alignment, they were the same figures I had seen in the woods, in the shadows, the lost ones. And then, in the middle of the circle, something else. A figure, taller than the rest, standing with its back to me. The outline of its form was sharp against the eerie glow, its face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence. It was the same figure I had seen from the moment I set foot in Black Hollow. The Hollow Man. The whispers grew louder, louder than ever, filling my head to the point of madness. Come to us, they chanted, their voices harmonizing in perfect unison. I could feel their pull, each whisper, each word tugging at my very soul, dragging me closer. Join us. A voice came from the figure in the center, its tone low and commanding. You've heard the call, Ranger. You've felt the pull of the forest. You can't leave now. The words felt like they were inside my mind, as if the figure was speaking directly into my thoughts. I tried to speak, to tell them to leave me alone, but the words caught in my throat, choking me. The very air around me seemed to be thickening, the pressure building, until I could hardly breathe. I looked around, desperate for a way out, but the figures were closing in. The lost ones, standing in their perfect circle, were no longer just shadows. They had faces now, pale, lifeless, their eyes black voids, hollow and empty. You are already one of us. The figure in the center spoke again, and this time, its voice was clearer, cutting through the chaos in my mind. It stepped forward, its long, shadowed arms reaching out toward me, and I could feel the coldness radiating from it. Come, join the others. Join us, or be lost forever in the forest. The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a moment, I swayed on my feet, the pressure in my chest almost unbearable. I could feel the ground beneath me giving way, like I was sinking into the earth itself. The shadows swirled around me, pulling me toward them, but I didn't want to give in. I couldn't give in. I was still me, still alive, still fighting. With a sudden, desperate movement, I broke free from the pull, stumbling backward, my heart racing. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I felt something inside me snap. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, as if they were reaching into my soul, trying to drag me back into the circle. The lost ones closed in on me, their hands outstretched, but I didn't stop. I ran. I didn't look back. The forest around me was alive now, the trees shifting and closing in, the ground beneath me trembling as if it too was trying to swallow me whole. But I couldn't stop. I ran through the twisted trees, my feet slipping on the wet earth, the whispers chasing me, filling my mind, drowning out all thoughts except one: escape. As I pushed through the dense underbrush, I felt the fog thickening around me, the air growing colder with each step. But then, just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw it. Light. Real light. Not the eerie, unnatural glow of the clearing, but the soft, golden glow of the town. Cross Hollow. The road was just ahead. With a final burst of strength, I broke through the trees and stumbled onto the road. The town was still there, bathed in the quiet, comforting light of the lampposts. I kept running, not stopping until I reached the diner. I banged on the door, my hands shaking, my body drenched in sweat. Will, the old man who had warned me, opened the door, his face pale with shock. "What happened?" he asked, his voice trembling. "They're real," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "The lost ones. They were waiting for me. The forest is alive, Will. It's alive." I collapsed inside, not caring that I was covered in mud and sweat. The door slammed shut behind me, and I looked at Will, but his face was no longer the one I knew. His eyes were hollow, empty. The whispering voices from the woods filled the room, swirling around me louder than ever. Will stepped closer, and I saw it now. The same void in his eyes, the same emptiness. He was one of them, a lost one. "You've joined us now," he whispered, his voice no longer his own, but the voice of the forest. "You can't escape." The door behind me slammed shut. The light from the diner flickered, and I felt the air grow colder, the shadows closing in. And then, everything went dark. Windfall Ridge wasn't on most maps. It wasn't that the place didn't exist. It did. But it was a forgotten corner of the world, hidden deep in the mountains. A place with a history buried in shadows, where the only sounds were the wind and the occasional cry of an owl. There were few who ventured up there, and those who did always returned with the same story. Something was wrong on Windfall Ridge. The wind howled like a living thing, and the trees, they bent in unnatural ways, as though they were reaching for you. I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or legends, but I had my reasons for wanting to visit Windfall Ridge. My brother Andrew had gone missing there a year ago. He had been hiking, just like so many others before him. But unlike those who had returned, Andrew didn't. His last known location was the Ridge, a place known for its eerie quiet and unsettling presence. The search teams combed the area for weeks, but nothing was found, not even a trace of him. No footprints, no belongings. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. His disappearance had consumed my every thought, my every moment. I couldn't rest. I needed to find him, to understand what had happened. So after months of planning, I set out on my own to uncover the truth about Windfall Ridge and what lurked there. I drove up early in the morning, the road twisting through thick forests and mist-covered hills. The air was cool, crisp, and the world felt isolated. The kind of isolation that made the woods feel alive, aware of your every step. The ride was long, but as I approached the base of Windfall Ridge, a knot tightened in my stomach. Something about the place felt off. The sun was just starting to set when I arrived at the foot of the ridge. The mist hung low, wrapping around the trees like a shroud. I knew I couldn't wait until morning. If I was going to find anything at all, I had to go now. I stepped out of my truck, and the air felt different, thicker. It was colder than I expected, even though it was still autumn. The woods were silent, as though they were holding their breath. The only sound was the rustling of my boots against the dry leaves beneath me. I pulled my jacket tighter around my shoulders and began the hike up. The trail was narrow and overgrown, the trees forming a dense canopy overhead. I could barely see the sky through the thick branches, and the further I walked, the less light there was. The shadows grew longer, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't long before I felt it. The shift in the air. A subtle change, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my skin crawl. The wind stopped. The trees stopped moving. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, I heard it, a whisper, low, unintelligible, but it was unmistakably there, like a voice carried on the wind. I froze, straining my ears. There was no one else on the trail. I was alone. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my nerves, but the whispers continued, growing louder with each step. They seemed to come from all directions, echoing in the trees. I quickened my pace, pushing myself further up the ridge, but the whispers followed me. They didn't sound like words at first, just a rustling of sounds, but slowly I began to make out a pattern, a rhythm, as if they were calling me. The trail twisted, and soon the trees gave way to a clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a massive rock formation, a jagged outcrop that looked out over the valley below. I felt the urge to approach it, almost as if something was guiding me, urging me forward. The whispers were louder now, almost like they were beckoning me to come closer. I took another step forward, my heart racing. The ground beneath my feet shifted, becoming softer, as though the earth itself was moving. I stopped. There, in the center of the clearing, was a figure. It was cloaked in shadow, standing still as if waiting for me. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its presence like a cold, suffocating weight pressing in on me. And then, I heard it again, the whisper. "Welcome to Windfall Ridge." The voice was low, almost familiar, as if it had come from somewhere deep inside me. My blood ran cold. I was standing on the very ridge where Andrew had vanished, and somehow, in the depths of the fog and the shadows, I felt that he was still here. The ridge had claimed him, and now it was calling me too. I couldn't move. The figure in the clearing, cloaked in shadow, stood there, still as a stone, and I could feel it. This oppressive, suffocating presence. It was as though the very air around me had grown heavy, thick with the weight of something ancient, something that had been watching, waiting for a long time. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to step back, a small motion at first. But then I felt the ground beneath me shift again. The whisper came again, clear now, almost as if it were directly in my ear. "Welcome to Windfall Ridge." The voice was familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was the same voice I had heard earlier, the voice that had pulled me here, the one that had called to me since I stepped foot on this cursed land. It didn't sound like the wind anymore. It was a voice, clear, almost human, but hollow, distant. It carried a weight to it, a deep sorrow. I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure. It was like the shadows themselves were holding me in place, pulling me toward it, drawing me in. I felt a pull, like an invisible force tugging at my chest, urging me to move closer. "Come to us," the voice whispered again, its tone more insistent now, desperate, as if it knew I was resisting, as if it knew I was close to leaving. "Come closer." I tried to shake it off. I was here for Andrew, not to get caught up in whatever nightmare this place had become. But the closer I got to the figure, the more I felt my resolve slipping. The shadows were stretching out toward me, as if they had a life of their own, and the figure remained still, its outline barely visible in the darkness, waiting. I had to move. I had to move. I turned on my heel and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. My breath was shallow, and I could hear the whispering grow louder, like 1,000 voices rushing at me from all directions. The wind had picked up, tearing through the trees. But the voices, they, were louder than anything. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the trees. It was something alive. Something that knew me, that knew what I was searching for. I didn't look back as I pushed through the underbrush, my legs burning with every step. The mist from earlier had rolled in thicker now, swallowing the trail, making it harder to see, harder to breathe. The whispers followed me, always just behind, urging me on, pulling me further into the woods. "You can't leave." I stopped dead in my tracks. The voice wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real, coming from behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing. Only the trees and the dark, swirling mist. "And join us," it said again, the voice sharp and insistent, as if it had been waiting for me to stop, to listen. I turned back toward the direction I had been running, but the path had changed. The woods were different now. The trees had grown taller, the shadows darker, the air heavier. It was as if the forest itself had shifted, rearranged, and I was standing in a place I didn't recognize. The trail I had been on was gone, replaced by thick roots and twisted vines that seemed to pull at my feet, trying to drag me back into the forest. I could feel it. Something was watching me, and I was no longer alone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wasn't going to fall for this. I wasn't going to lose myself in the madness of this place like the others had. Andrew had to be out there. He had to be. I had to find him. To get him out of here, no matter the cost. The forest wasn't just a place. It was alive. I pushed forward, stepping over the twisted roots that now seemed to grow even more entangled with each step I took. But then, through the mist, I saw something that made my stomach churn. A shape, crouching low to the ground, partially hidden by the brush. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was tall, thin, with limbs that stretched out far too long. Its back was arched unnaturally, and its face was turned toward the ground, hidden beneath a mass of tangled hair. The air grew even colder as I watched it, and I could hear it. Whispering. It was a whisperer, just like the voices I had been hearing. But it wasn't calling me. It was speaking to itself, to something, or someone, in the dark. I reached for the flashlight in my pocket, but before I could turn it on, the creature's head snapped up. Its eyes, black as coal, locked onto mine, and for a moment, I could do nothing but stare back. A coldness gripped me, deep in my chest, as if my very soul was freezing in its gaze. It spoke, its voice a guttural rasp that echoed in my bones. "You shouldn't be here." The words hit me like a physical blow, and for a split second, I couldn't breathe. My legs trembled beneath me, and I could feel the ground shifting again, pulling me closer to the creature. The whispers grew louder, faster, like they were all speaking at once, drowning out my thoughts. I couldn't move. The creature's eyes didn't blink. They stared at me, and I could feel its presence in every fiber of my being, pushing against me, pulling me in. You've come too far," it hissed. I forced myself to turn and run again, but I didn't make it far before I tripped over a root and fell face first into the damp earth. My head spun, and for a moment, I was disoriented. But as I pushed myself up, I saw something else in the distance, a figure, a person, standing still at the edge of the forest, watching me. It was Andrew, His face was pale, his eyes hollow, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes were tattered, and his hair was long and matted, but there was no mistaking him. He was standing there, not moving, not speaking. I stumbled to my feet and called out to him, my voice hoarse. "Andrew, it's me! Come back with me! We can get out of here! We can leave this place!" But he didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge me. He just stood there, his hollow eyes fixed on me, waiting. And then, in that moment, I realized the truth. Andrew wasn't lost anymore. He had become one of them. The lost ones. I had come to find him, but in doing so, I had joined them. The realization hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. Andrew was no longer Andrew. He had become one of them, the lost ones. His face, once full of life, was now empty, hollow eyes staring through me, not recognizing the brother who had come to save him. "Andrew!" I called out again, but the words felt hollow, lost in the fog that enveloped us. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. For a moment, everything around me seemed to freeze. The forest, the air, the ground, all of it stopped moving. The shadows lengthened, stretching toward me like tendrils, reaching out, pulling me in. I could feel the cold, suffocating grip of the forest closing in, and I knew that I was trapped. But then the whispers came again, louder than ever. "You are one of us now." I turned quickly, my head spinning. The figures, the shadows, they were closing in around me, circling, waiting. The woods weren't just alive, they were hungry, and they had been waiting for me. "Come join us." The voice was no longer Andrew's, but something far older, deeper. The voice of the forest itself. I tried to step back, but the ground beneath me seemed to shift, pulling me toward the center of the clearing. My legs were heavy, my body unwilling to obey. The shadows closed in tighter, and I could feel the cold creeping into my bones, into my very soul. "Don't resist," the voice whispered again, and this time, I felt it in my chest, like a pressure building from inside. The air around me grew colder, and the mist thickened, wrapping around me like a shroud. I was losing myself. The whispers were too much. The pull of the shadows was too strong, but something inside me screamed, not to give in. I couldn't give in. I had come here for Andrew, and I wasn't going to leave without him. With a desperate surge of will, I forced my legs to move. I stumbled, but I kept going, pushing through the thick fog and the stretching shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. "Stay. Stay with us." I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had to get to Andrew, to snap him out of whatever dark spell this place had cast on him. He was still in there, somewhere. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched his arm. It was cold, unnaturally cold, like ice. I could feel the life draining out of him, his body stiff and unresponsive. But there was still a flicker in his eyes, a hint of recognition. "Andrew," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You can hear me. I know you can. Fight it. You're not one of them. You're my brother." His eyes flickered, just for a moment. The hollow emptiness in them shifted, and I thought I had gotten through to him. But then, the shadows around us twisted, and the whispers grew into a deafening roar. "He is ours. He belongs to the forest now," they screamed, their voices like thunder in my ears. Andrew's body jerked, and I stumbled back in horror as his face contorted into something that wasn't him. His mouth stretched open, but it wasn't a scream. It was a sound that was not human, a guttural cry that echoed through the forest. The shadows around us surged forward, swallowing him whole. My brother, Andrew, was gone, consumed by the very woods that had taken so many before him. I felt a tear fall down my cheek, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, helpless to stop it. The forest had claimed him, and now it was coming for me. The wind picked up, swirling around me, and the voices reached a deafening crescendo. "Join us," they repeated again and again, until the words became a chant, a rhythm pulling at my soul. The figure in the center of the clearing, the hollow man, moved toward me. Its hollow, empty face stared at me as if it knew my every thought, my every fear. It didn't speak, but its presence was enough to make my skin crawl. The wind howled louder, and I felt myself being pulled toward it, toward the darkness. "You can't leave, Ranger," the voice inside my head said, its tone final as death. "You belong to the ridge now. You will stay with us. Forever." I tried to pull away, but my body wouldn't obey. I couldn't move, couldn't run, couldn't escape. The shadows were too thick, the whispers too strong. The hollow man stepped closer, its long, skeletal hand reaching out toward me. "Welcome," it whispered. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't fight anymore. The forest had won. The lost ones had claimed me. And then, just as I thought I would disappear into the dark, something shifted. A flicker of light, real light, pierced the darkness. The mist around me began to fade, the shadows dissipating, and the whispers fell silent. I opened my eyes and looked around. The clearing was gone. The trees had receded, and the fog had lifted. The forest was still, unnervingly still. But I wasn't alone. There, standing in front of me, was Andrew. His eyes were no longer hollow. He was whole again, alive. He smiled at me, but it wasn't the smile I remembered. It was cold, distant, and his voice, when he spoke, was not his own. "You're home now," he said, his voice echoing through the trees. And in that moment, I realized that I was not going to leave Windfall Ridge. I had become one of the lost ones,